February 17th, 1944. The Japanese destroyer Maikaze was pulling troops from Truk when Captain Kenma Isohisa spotted a massive silhouette on the horizon. His gut twisted. It was USS New Jersey, the fastest battleship in the world. He ordered full speed ahead. Maikaze was light and nimble, but it didn't matter. The floating citadel, 20 times heavier, wasn't just keeping up. She was gaining. There was no escape. Isohisa made his decision. He turned Maikaze around. He would meet her head-on. The ocean erupted. USS Iowa joined the hunt, her 16-inch guns hurling Volkswagen-sized shells. Katori, a Japanese cruiser, was hit dead center, shattered with a single shell. 6 more followed. Maikaze was next. Captain Carl F. Holden, aboard New Jersey, saw the impossible. Maikaze wasn't retreating. She was charging. A torpedo run. Even the most powerful battleship afloat could be sunk by well-placed torpedoes. The stakes flipped in a second. Holden gave the order to fire. 20 5-inch guns roared. The Maikaze was ripped apart, fire and steel raining into the sea. But it was too late. Before she vanished, Maikaze got her final command through. A full spread of torpedoes in the water, wakes closing in. New Jersey's full thrust of 212,000 horsepower was thrown into a brutal turn. The battleship was about to find out what being the fastest in the world really meant. On New Jersey's bridge, alarms screamed. Officers froze. The battleship heaved to turn. Maikaze was gone, but 3,000 men aboard America's most valuable battleship were left praying for a miracle. Resurrection. In the aftermath of World War II, the Soviet Navy was a mere coastal defense force, vastly inferior to the U.S. Navy's armada of aircraft carriers. To Soviet leadership, it was an afterthought, until Admiral Sergei Gorshkov arrived. Appointed commander-in-chief in 1956, Gorshkov saw what others had missed. Control of the seas meant control of global power. The Soviet Union could no longer remain boxed in. It had to challenge U.S. naval supremacy. His vision was clear: transform the Soviet Navy from a stagnant coastal fleet into a global force. Matching the U.S. Navy ship for ship was impossible. Instead, Gorshkov pioneered an unconventional approach: missiles, submarines, and relentless expansion. He championed nuclear-powered submarines like the Typhoon class, the largest ever built, capable of launching nuclear strikes from beneath the waves. To confront U.S. carrier strike groups, he developed the Kirov-class battlecruisers, heavily armed with anti-ship and anti-aircraft missiles, designed to strike from beyond carriers' defenses. By the 1970s, the Soviet Navy was everywhere, patrolling the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian Ocean, and Mediterranean. NATO exercises were shadowed, strategic choke points monitored, and for the first time, a continuous Russian naval presence spanned the globe. Even Soviet aircraft carriers became a reality with the Kiev class, the first steps toward a true carrier fleet. The transformation stunned American admirals. Once unchallenged, the U.S. Navy now faced a global Soviet presence, capable of contesting them on every front. The Pentagon saw the writing on the wall. American naval dominance was slipping away. The response was a strategic counterstrike of unprecedented scale: the 600-ship Navy Initiative. Under President Ronald Reagan, the U.S. launched one of history's most ambitious military buildups. The goal was simple but monumental: to expand to 600 warships, an overwhelming force that would reassert dominance in every ocean of the world. Under Reagan's motto of peace through strength, this was the only way of keeping the Cold War from heating up. But time was against them. Building new ships from scratch would take years, but there was something else they could do: bring back some of America's most legendary warships from retirement. The first war machine to return was an obvious choice: one of the most legendary battleships ever built, a vessel that had crushed enemies in World War II and rained fire on North Vietnam. USS New Jersey. The era of uncontested American naval power was over, but the fight to reclaim it had just begun. The ultimate battleship class. 50 years earlier, the U.S. Navy faced another threat to its very existence. Rivals were no longer bound by the treaties that had once kept naval expansion in check. Across the Atlantic and the Pacific, Warships were built with a single purpose in mind: world domination. In Japan, naval engineers worked in secrecy, constructing the largest battleships in history. The Yamato and Musashi dwarfed any warship in human history. Their 18.1-inch guns were unlike anything the world had ever seen, and they were designed to destroy enemy battleships at ludicrous distances before they could even hope to return fire. At the time, even the most advanced Western battleships, like the British King George V class and the US North Carolina class, only had 14 and 16-inch guns. In a world where battleships were the queens of the oceans, having one capable of hurling 3,219-pound shells over a distance of 26 miles meant it was uncomfortably close to a checkmate. Meanwhile, Germany had launched its own challenge to Allied sea power in the Atlantic. The Bismarck-class battleships, capable of an impressive 30 knots, were faster than most US battleships. Heavily armored and carrying 15-inch guns, they were built to obliterate convoys and outrun larger enemy vessels. The British were already scrambling to counter the threat. If the US was drawn into the war, its navy would have to do the same. The US needed to develop a large and heavily armed battleship to stand a chance against the massive Yamato-class battleships, but also be fast and nimble enough to catch and destroy the German Bismarck-class battleships if they were ever to battle. The design process began in 1938. The obvious answer was brute force. Thicker armor, bigger guns, a battleship that could take a beating and dish it back. But the US took a different approach. Speed would be their weapon. The result was the Iowa class. At 33 knots, it was the fastest battleship of its time, able to maneuver with carrier fleets, dictate the terms of engagement, and deny the enemy the advantage. But speed wasn't its only weapon. 9 16-inch guns, controlled by cutting-edge radar, turned the Iowa into a long-range hunter. Against the Bismarck, it was superior in every way. Against the Yamato, its shells were smaller, but with radar-guided precision, it could fire first, hitting its target long before the enemy knew it was in range. The armor was a calculated risk. It could withstand 16-inch shells, the largest the US believed an enemy would use. Then Yamato appeared. Its 18.1-inch shells would tear through Iowa's armor like paper. On paper, it was a mismatch. But a ship's true power isn't just its armor. It's how it fights, moves, and survives. In the Pacific, the age of the battleship was coming to an end. While Japan and Germany built their battleships to dominate through raw firepower, the US envisioned something more dangerous, a lightning-fast yet powerful battleship that could rush ahead of carrier groups and keep enemy ships at bay, while carrier-launched warplanes finished them off. Where Yamato held the most firepower, Iowa held the strategic advantage. The fastest battleship. If speed was the Iowa class's most lethal weapon, then USS New Jersey was the sharpest blade in the arsenal. Officially, all 4 Iowa-class battleships, Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin, were rated for a maximum speed of 33 knots. However, shipbuilding is never perfect, and minor weight, maintenance, and construction differences could tilt the scales. New Jersey, often the lightest due to specific deployments and refits, held the edge. During trials, she set a blistering record of 35.2 knots, edging out Iowa, which maxed out at 34.9 knots. Over the years, as refits added extra weight, all Iowa-class battleships slowed. However, New Jersey's hull and propulsion systems remained in peak condition, keeping her the fastest battleship in history. At 32 to 35 knots, destroyers and cruisers were designed to be swift, built under the unshakable rule that no battleship could ever hope to match their speed. New Jersey shattered that rule. She was suddenly hunting in their waters, closing the gap before the enemy even had time to react. She didn't need to catch them outright, just get close enough. With a 24-mile range, her 16-inch guns rendered escape meaningless. Against New Jersey, there was no running, no hiding. Christened on December 7th, 1942, the first anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, USS New Jersey's launch was a spectacle of power. Slipping stern first into the water, she momentarily kissed the shores of her namesake state before being hauled into dry dock, where an army of steelworkers and welders swarmed over her, installing her 3 massive armored gun turrets in the intricate web of radar, fire control, and communications equipment. Meanwhile, her crew arrived to train relentlessly, studying every system, preparing for the inevitable moment when New Jersey would sail into the fire. Commissioned into service on May 23, 1943, under Captain Carl F. Holden, she wasted no time. By early 1944, she was in the Pacific, steaming into war. During the invasion of the Marshall Islands, while American forces clawed their way onto the beaches, New Jersey stood offshore. Her 16-inch guns hurled destruction onto Japanese positions, paving the way for the assault. This was only the beginning. From then on, Big J, as she was endearingly called, was everywhere. She was the hammer behind every major amphibious assault after 1943. The Marshall Islands, New Guinea, the Carolines, the Marianas, the Philippines, Palau, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Her guns shattered enemy defenses ahead of every American landing operation. Twice she launched attacks on Truk Atoll, the Empire of Japan's most formidable naval fortress in the South Pacific. But soon, something became painfully clear. The war USS New Jersey was designed to fight was nowhere to be found. She had been designed to challenge the powerful Japanese and German battleships in ship-to-ship combat. But the reality of war in the Pacific was taking a very different direction. Battleship-to-battleship encounters were practically non-existent. Instead, warfare and naval warfare hinged on carrier groups, which could target and decimate battleships long before their guns became an issue. This situation led to USS New Jersey and her sister ships being assigned tasks that were very different from those they had been initially designed for. They used their anti-aircraft arsenal to keep carriers safe from enemy air attacks. Nevertheless, alongside her sister ship, USS Iowa, New Jersey had the rare opportunity to actually engage in ship-to-ship combat and demonstrate what it was capable of. In the early hours of February 17, 1944, the United States unleashed Operation Hailstone, a ferocious assault on Japan's bastion at Truk Lagoon in the Caroline Islands, one of the most critical Japanese bases left in the Pacific. As U.S. carrier-based aircraft descended on the target, Japanese commanders, caught off guard, scrambled to escort evacuation ships from the area. The urgency was almost unbearable. USS New Jersey was in the middle of the action, and it was tasked, along with USS Iowa, with intercepting and annihilating any Japanese vessels attempting to escape, ensuring no reprieve for the enemy. As the situation spiraled out of control, the Japanese destroyer Maikaze, under Captain Kenma Isohisa, undertook the risky task of extracting personnel from the Lagoon. It didn't take long for Isohisa to spot the silhouette of USS New Jersey on the horizon. He faced a harrowing choice. Recognizing the impossibility of running from the fastest battleship in the world, he steeled himself to face a direct confrontation. Maikaze charged headlong into battle. The combined might of New Jersey and her escorts was devastating. Before being utterly unmade by a torrent of 5-inch gunfire, Maikaze unleashed a salvo of torpedoes, a final act of defiance. Yet, with deft maneuvering and a great deal of luck, New Jersey sidestepped all 5 torpedoes. The close call reminded the crew that even aboard the most powerful warship on Earth and serving the greatest navy in the world, they were not immune from the risks of war. Winning World War II. USS New Jersey continued her career in World War II, escorting aircraft carriers during their first massive raid on Tokyo. Her gunners ripped through the skies, downing 20 enemy aircraft, including kamikazes, while plucking American pilots from the ocean after their planes were shot down. Then came the defining battles of the Pacific War. First, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, June 1944, the largest carrier battle in history. New Jersey was at the center of it all, part of the impenetrable shield of anti-aircraft fire that slaughtered Japan's air arm in the infamous Marianas Turkey Shoot. When the smoke cleared, Japan's naval aviation was crippled, its elite pilots lost, and its carriers left defenseless. 3 months later, Big J led the fleet into the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. The chaotic, multi-day clash of battleships, carriers, destroyers, and kamikazes was a turning point in World War II. In the end, Japan's fleet was shattered beyond repair. It was the battle that sealed the Empire's fate. It wasn't just the scale of her battles that made New Jersey stand out. It was also who commanded from her deck. She was the only warship to serve as flagship for both of America's greatest admirals, Raymond Spruance, the tactician who engineered Midway's victory, and William Bull Halsey, the aggressive commander who spearheaded America's naval success. She was there for the invasion of Peleliu, the brutal landings at Leyte, Mindoro, and Luzon, the Battle of Formosa, and the U.S. Navy's audacious sweep through the South China Sea. She helped dismantle Japan's hold over the Pacific, one engagement at a time. When the war finally ended, after years of fighting Axis warships, blasting enemy strongholds, and shielding aircraft carriers, Big J returned home, carrying thousands of weary but victorious American troops back to the mainland. She had done her job better than any battleship before her. Coming back. Big J sat idle for years. The Navy called it reserve status, but battleships were dismissed as outdated relics, too costly and too slow for modern warfare. Then Korea exploded. On June 25, 1950, communist troops stormed the 38th parallel, the Soviet tanks rolling through weak defenses. U.S. forces, soft from peacetime duty in Japan, crumbled. The Busan perimeter shrank by the day. MacArthur needed firepower. Truman's order cut through the chain of command. Reactivate New Jersey. On November 21, 1950, Captain David M. Tyree stepped onto her deck. The ship was a hive of activity. Sailors scraping away preservation grease, boilers roaring to life after years of silence. Her 9 16-inch guns, each barrel heavier than a Sherman tank, were recalibrated for war. By May 17, 1951, she was off Korea's east coast and didn't arrive quietly. Vice Admiral Harold M. Martin raised his flag aboard her bridge. The message was clear. America had brought its heavyweight to the fight. 3 days later, New Jersey opened fire. Once on harbor erupted. Her fire control teams were precise. Each 2,700-pound shell traveled 23 miles, reducing bunkers, supply depots, and gun emplacements to rubble. Communist troops learned fast. Whenever New Jersey appeared offshore, they retreated inland, beyond her reach. She was unstoppable. She arrived, unloaded her guns, and then shifted positions before enemy gunners could react. No artillery could touch her, and no enemy ship dared approach. In July 1953, Tyree gave the order to fire all guns. The broadside shook the ship from stem to stern. Caves collapsed. Bunkers disintegrated. North Korean artillery crumbled. 2 weeks later, the armistice was signed. A battleship in Vietnam. Vietnam was different. Guerrilla warfare, deep within the dark jungle. Naval clashes were non-existent, and the age of the battleship was long gone. Big J went back to sleep in 1957, moored alongside her rusting sisters. Then, in 1967, American planes were falling at a staggering rate. North Vietnamese gunners and Soviet-made missiles tore through U.S. squadrons. Every lost aircraft meant millions in technology gone. Every downed pilot was a disaster. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara needed a solution to show the American public back home, who was growing increasingly weary of the war, that the price they were paying was about to yield results. A radical idea landed on his desk: bring back the battleship. North Vietnam had nothing that could threaten 45,000 tons of armor plate. New Jersey could sit offshore and unleash devastation for days on end, while pilots slept safely in their bunks. Through the winter of 1967 to 68, she was reborn. Workers swarmed her decks, installing advanced electronics, modernizing fire control, and even carving a helicopter pad into her stern. By April 6, 1968, Big J was back, the only battleship on Earth still in service. A relic from another era, revived for a war no one had foreseen when she was built. She reached Vietnam's coastline on September 29, 1968. The next day, she fired her first rounds in 16 years. 29 16-inch shells arced over the jungle. For months, she pounded the shore. When the 101st Airborne was pinned down near Hue, her guns cleared entire hillsides. When Marine divisions needed fire support, she delivered what weeks of airstrikes could not. By the time she left Vietnam in April 1969, she had fired 5,688 rounds from her 16-inch guns and 14,891 from her 5-inch batteries, more ordnance than she had unleashed in World War II and Korea combined. Being completely unopposed had its advantages. And just as McNamara predicted, North Vietnam never touched her. Their missiles couldn't reach her. their torpedo boats never dared. When New Jersey finally returned home, she had rewritten the rules of war and prolonged the legacy of battleships far beyond what anyone expected. Cold War. As arguably the most iconic and powerful battleship in U.S. Navy history, her selection to be brought back and refitted for a new age of warfare in the 1980s was a moment of national pride and excitement. The modernization of USS New Jersey was the ultimate test to see how fast the U.S. could truly expand its naval power in the 1980s. Unlike new warships, which required years of construction, the Iowa-class battleships could be put back to service relatively quickly. Their thick armor and massive 16-inch guns remained as formidable as ever, but it was their new capabilities that would make them truly fearsome in the Cold War's high-tech battlefield. The refit program transformed New Jersey and her sister ships into nuclear-age war machines. The battleship's outdated anti-aircraft batteries were stripped away and replaced with modern phalanx close-in weapon systems, capable of intercepting incoming missiles. To counter the Soviet Navy's growing missile threat, the ship was outfitted with Tomahawk cruise missiles, giving it the ability to strike deep into enemy territory with pinpoint accuracy. Harpoon anti-ship missiles were added as well, turning New Jersey into a serious threat against Soviet surface combatants. The result was a hybrid warship, part relic, part modern missile platform. The Soviets had spent decades preparing to face American aircraft carriers, but now they were forced to contend with something they had never anticipated: a re-emergence of battleships that could rain down destruction from beyond the horizon while standing up to damage that would cripple most modern warships. USS New Jersey was officially recommissioned in 1982 and quickly deployed to the world's most volatile hotspots. The battleship first made its presence known in the eastern Mediterranean, where it supported U.S. operations during the Lebanese Civil War. In 1983, after the bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut, New Jersey delivered a response that was both symbolic and devastating. Her 16-inch guns opened fire, unleashing a barrage of shells against enemy positions. It was the first time those guns had been used in combat since Vietnam, and the message was clear. America was not leaving the seas of the world, and it would resurrect every ship in its scrapyard before allowing the Soviets to claim naval victory. The Soviet Union was not pleased with this new development. The reactivation of these massive, heavily armored battleships and the expansion of the U.S. fleet indicated a shift in strategy that threatened Moscow's naval ambitions. The Kirov-class battlecruisers, designed and built to counter U.S. maritime dominance, now faced a considerable challenge from warships equipped with heavier armor and a similarly powerful missile arsenal, plus the addition of the overwhelming legacy of 16-inch guns. The balance of power at sea was shifting once again. Throughout the 1980s, USS New Jersey prowled the world's oceans, acting as a floating deterrent against Soviet aggression. No Soviet missile ship would dare step out of line, with the fastest, most powerful, and recently updated battleship patrolling about. The Iowa-class battleships had returned not just as relics of history, but as instruments of Cold War strategy, proving that even in an age of missiles and aircraft carriers, raw firepower still had its place on the battlefield. However, as the Cold War wound down and defense priorities shifted, the cost of maintaining these massive and ancient battleships became harder to justify. By 1991, with the Soviet Union collapsing, the need for a 600-ship navy diminished. The legendary USS New Jersey was decommissioned for the last time in 1991, marking the end of one of the most iconic careers in maritime history. Today, she serves as a museum ship in Camden, New Jersey, preserving her legacy for future generations. She remains the most powerful battleship in the history of warfare.